you ever feel like you're dragging through life with no momentum, just kind of stuck in your own head, knowing you could be more, but having no idea where to start? Yeah, that's where Jordan Peterson's 90-day method hits different. This isn't about some motivational fluff or one-size-fits-all advice. This is about tearing down the broken parts of your internal code, the beliefs, behaviors, and self-sabotage that keep you from moving and rebuilding it from the ground up. Real change, real structure, real work. So in this video, we're going deep. You'll see why you need to stop aiming at perfection, how to take painfully small but powerful steps forward, and why the first thing you've got to fix is your vision for the future. This is reinventing your inner code, and Jordan Peterson's 90-day plan isn't about changing the world, it's about changing you first. Peterson starts with a hard truth. The thing you're aiming at, your ideal self, might be the very thing that's paralyzing you. He breaks it down like this. When you compare where you are to where you think you should be, that gap can feel unbearable. It can crush you. It's like you've created this massive fire-breathing dragon, but you forgot to give yourself a sword. So what do most people do? They either lower the ideal or inflate their self-worth to avoid facing the gap. But Peterson's answer isn't to just give up on the ideal, it's to scale the dragon down to size. If your vision for your future self is too massive, too perfect, you're setting yourself up to fail before you've even begun. The trick? Shrink the vision down until it's something you're actually willing to move toward, even if it feels pathetic at first. And yeah, that first step is gonna sting. You're gonna feel like an imposter, like a fraud, but you can't move from who you are to who you could be in one big jump. It's step by step, brick by brick. Peterson compares this to building a hierarchy of progression, a stairway between where you are and where you want to go. And the smaller the steps, the more likely you are to take them. Because once you start moving, something interesting happens. You're not just climbing, you're accelerating. Peterson calls this the Matthew principle. To those who have, more will be given. To those who have not, everything will be taken. It's harsh, but it explains why tiny wins matter so much. If you're moving up, even slowly, the process compounds. Small victories multiply into big ones. But if you're falling, you don't drift downward, you crash. That's why reinventing yourself starts here, not with ambition, not with hype, but with the brutal honesty to say, I'm not where I should be, but I can take one real step forward today. Peterson doesn't just talk theory, he lived this, and he's brutally honest about how bad it was at the start. Back in the mid-80s, he was 23, smoked like a chimney, drank too much, weighed around 135 pounds at 6 feet 1 inch, basically a twig with a nervous system. His first step towards self-reinvention? A swim-size class, and it was rough. It was him, one overweight guy in just as bad shape, and 7 women all over 70 years old, who, by the way, could outswim him. It was humiliating, but he stuck it out. A whole semester. Then he moved to weightlifting. Picture this. He's under a bench press, struggling with 75 pounds, and some meathead walks over to correct his form. Again, total humiliation. But again, he kept showing up. That's the lesson. The first steps will feel shameful. You'll feel weak, embarrassed, exposed, and that's exactly why most people don't start. They'd rather stay in their heads than get crushed under a barbell in front of strangers. But if you're serious about changing your life, Peterson says you have to accept this. You start at the bottom where you're weak. That's the only honest way forward. In his case, the small steps added up. Over the next 3.5 years, he quit smoking, quit drinking, gained 40 pounds of muscle, not overnight, but through disciplined, ugly, embarrassing effort, daily, and it paid off beyond the physical. Working out with dumbbells didn't just build strength, it built coordination, and with coordination came confidence. He could dance better. He felt more at ease in his body. That translated into social life, into presence. It all stacked. So yeah, those first reps, they might feel like nothing. They might even make you feel like less than nothing. But here's what most people never figure out. The ball doesn't roll in a straight line. It rolls geometrically. Slow progress becomes fast progress. One day you can't lift 75 pounds. 3 years later, you've rebuilt your entire identity. Tiny, shameful steps. That's how the inner code gets rewritten. Here's the raw truth Peterson doesn't sugarcoat. If you want to fix what's weak in you, you have to start by admitting you're weak, and not in some abstract philosophical way. He means you need to confront your actual insufficiencies to your own shame. That's what most people run from. That's what kills progress before it starts. People will dodge, deny, and distract themselves from their own flaws because it's easier than staring them in the face. But Peterson says the transformation only begins when you accept where you're failing and how badly. People avoid the gym not because they're lazy, but because they're ashamed. Ashamed of how they look, ashamed of how out of shape they've let themselves become, ashamed to start from zero in public. But avoiding that shame means avoiding growth. Peterson talks about how it took him 3 years to stop smoking. That's not instant change. That's slow, frustrating, repeated failure. But he kept going. He stopped drinking, gained serious muscle, ate 6 meals a day just to sustain the training. It was intense, but it wasn't just about building a body. It was about building belief. Bit by bit, he developed a new kind of internal stability. And with that came a whole new rhythm to how he lived. His lower body got more coordinated. He felt more in control. Even something as seemingly small as dancing became easier. It's not because dancing was the goal, but because strength translates. See, when you begin to fix one part of your life, just one, you build the momentum and confidence to confront the next, and that is the reinvention loop. But again, it starts by looking at your weakest point and saying, this is where I am, and it sucks, but I'm not gonna lie to myself anymore. There's nothing glamorous about that moment, but that brutal honesty is what sets the foundation for everything that follows. You don't build a new identity by pretending. You build it by showing up weak and sticking with it anyway. So when Peterson talks about facing yourself with honesty and shame, he's not trying to humiliate you. He's showing you where the power actually begins. You want to rewrite your code? Start with the line that hurts the most. Everyone starts off naive. That's just part of being alive. When you're naive, you're optimistic, but it's not real optimism. It's blind. You think everything's going to work out, that people are basically good, and that the future is just going to take care of itself. And then reality shows up. You get burned, betrayed, knocked down harder than you thought possible, and that naive optimism, gone, just like that. Now, here's the twist. Peterson says that cynicism, as bitter and jaded as it seems, is actually a step forward, because at least the veil has dropped. You've seen the darkness in the world and in yourself. You're not pretending anymore. Cynicism is the death of innocence. But here's the trap. You can get stuck there. And that's where most people rot, thinking they've figured it out because they stopped believing in anything, thinking that cynicism is clarity, that sarcasm is strength, that checking out is wisdom. Peterson says that's a mistake. If you stop there, if you let bitterness and resentment define your worldview, you're just creating another hell one where you think you're smart for expecting the worst all the time. And the worst part? Cynicism just makes the bad stuff more likely. It drags you down. So the real question becomes, how do you climb out of that? How do you recover optimism without going back to naivety? Peterson's answer: you substitute courage. You don't lie to yourself and pretend things are fine. You stare the chaos straight in the face and say, I'm going forward anyway. You act like the future can be managed because it has to be. And that's not just some motivational phrase, it's a moral imperative. He says you have a duty to move toward the future like you can handle it, even if the future's a storm. Especially then, it's easy to conjure up an apocalypse. Just turn on the news, social collapse, personal tragedy, global crisis. It's endless. But Peterson pushes back on all of that fear, not by denying it, but by reframing your attitude toward it. Naivety is blind, cynicism is bitter, courage is clear-eyed and forward-moving. And that shift? That's the core of inner reinvention. You don't rebuild your code by wishing or whining. You rebuild it by refusing to collapse under the weight of the future. Courage is what replaces the illusion. Courage is what moves you forward when nothing else will. Let's say life hits you so hard it knocks the air out of your soul. You get sick. You lose everything. People betray you. And it's not even because you did something wrong. It just happens. Peterson uses the story of Job from the Bible to drill this in. Job was a good man. Even God said so. And still, he lost everything. His health, his family, his wealth. He got sick in a way that disfigured him. His friends laughed at him. His wife told him to curse God and die. That's the kind of suffering that breaks most people. But Job didn't break. He didn't claim to be perfect, but he refused to believe that his pain was proof of his worthlessness. He said, I don't understand this, but I'm not giving up on myself. I'm not giving up on the good. That's what Peterson is getting at. Even when it seems like the universe is against you, even when the pain feels unjust, your job is to maintain faith, not in dogma, but in the idea that things can still be endured with dignity, that you are still responsible for how you carry the weight. Because if you don't, if you let the bitterness in, now you've opened another layer of hell. There's suffering, and then there's suffering corrupted by resentment, suffering turned into revenge, into hate, into a thirst to watch everything around you burn just because you're burning too. Peterson says that's the most dangerous thing a person can do. Respond to injustice by becoming worse than the injustice itself. You think life is bad? Wait until you let yourself become the monster you were trying to survive. So when he talks about faith, he's not saying believe in magic. He's saying this: faith means acting like you can ride the wave no matter how high it gets. It's courage in the face of what looks like absolute destruction. And when that faith is shared, when people carry it together in goodwill, that's what gets us through the storm. He's clear about it. The people trying to use fear to gain control, they'll always have an apocalypse to sell. That's easy. But what's hard and rare and necessary is resisting fear with resolve. Because when you lose faith, when you give in to bitterness, when you fold, you don't just lose the game, you start playing for the other side. So far, we've talked about pain, courage, and the brutal honesty required to face who you really are. But if that's all you do, just sit in the wreckage, you don't move. You just become aware of the fire, not the exit. That's where the 90-day future authoring plan comes in. Peterson's big idea is this: if you don't have a clear vision for your future, you'll drift. And if you're drifting, it only takes a little resistance, boredom, distraction, fear to knock you completely off course. But with vision, even vague, clumsy vision, you start to walk a line. And the 90-day plan is about giving your brain a map, not fantasy, not perfect life daydreaming, an actual functional vision for you. And here's the thing, it works. Peterson's team ran studies on it. Students who spent 90 minutes doing the future authoring exercise before college were 50% less likely to drop out their first year, especially the ones most at risk of failing. Not because they suddenly got smarter, but because they finally had a reason to keep going. The process starts simple. Step 1. Imagine what your life could look like 5 years from now if you were treating yourself like someone you actually cared about, not just tolerated, not just survived with, someone you loved. Peterson knows most people don't even try to take care of themselves. They're way better at doing it for others. So he flips that. He says, pretend you're someone you care about. Now ask, what do you want? What do you need? What would justify the suffering you know is coming? That last part is key. He's not saying chase happiness. He's saying build a life worth suffering for, because life is a tragedy. You're going to deal with loss, betrayal, aging, disappointment. So if you don't construct something meaningful, something powerful enough to make that pain worth carrying, you'll break. The writing process forces clarity. It breaks your life into 8 domains: relationships, career, health, education, community, temptation, personal habits, and spiritual grounding, and makes you spell it out. What would a good life in each of these areas actually look like for you? Then the reverse. What if you do nothing? What if you stay exactly where you are for the next 5 years? What hell would you drift into? That contrast between vision and decay, that's fuel. And the 90-day plan walks you step by step into writing it all down. You create the map, then you build a schedule around it. Not some rigid, tyrannical thing, but something you design, something you'll actually use. That's how you rewrite your inner code. Not by dreaming harder, but by defining the target clearly enough to aim. So you've got the vision. You've written out the future you want and the hell you want to avoid. But now comes the part everyone hates, the follow-through. Peterson's not vague about this. You need structure. You need a schedule. You need discipline. Because without it, you're just hoping life will organize itself around your goals, and it won't. And no, he's not saying turn yourself into some productivity robot. He's saying something more grounded. If your days are chaotic, you're going to feel anxious. Not because something's wrong with you, but because your nervous system hates unpredictability. Peterson says people confuse this all the time. They think they're bored or depressed, when really they're just lost. They don't know what to do next, and they don't have a plan to fall back on. That's where a schedule changes everything. Start simple. Don't load your calendar with 14-hour grind sessions and think you're crushing it. That's a delusion. Instead, put in the stuff you already do: eating, sleeping, even downtime. Make the schedule your ally, not your enemy. Peterson puts it like this: you're not generating an external tyrant. You're generating something you can be held to, something that helps you get what you want. Think about that. The schedule isn't there to punish you. It's there to protect your goals from the chaos of your emotions. And if you're the kind of person who hates structure, that's fine. He even addresses that. Maybe your personality leans low on conscientiousness. Maybe you're naturally scattered or overly agreeable. Fine. Then you work with that. You schedule things you're likely to follow through on: social time if you're extroverted, quiet space if you're introverted, creative time if you're open-minded. The key isn't perfection, it's consistency. You don't start with mastering your entire life. You start with managing 1 hour, one task, one routine. Then you build. Even something as small as putting a coffee cup back in the cupboard, done with care, done intentionally, can start a feedback loop of order. It sounds silly, it's not. That's how you train the system. Because here's what discipline really is: identity in motion. You're not just checking boxes. You're reinforcing who you are and what you stand for, one task at a time. You're proving to yourself that your vision matters, that your time matters, that you matter. No one's coming to save your day for you, but a good schedule, that's how you save it yourself. You can have vision, you can have structure, you can have a perfect schedule, but if you don't know how to stand up for yourself, none of it lasts. Peterson's blunt. A lot of people fail not because they're incapable, but because they're too agreeable. They let people walk all over them. They say yes to everything. They suppress what they actually want. Why? Because deep down they think if they assert themselves, they're not being a good person. But that's backwards. If you never say no, if you never push back, if you never speak up, you will become resentful. And resentment doesn't just stay quiet. It festers, it builds into bitterness, and from there, it turns toxic, fast. Peterson's seen this up close, both clinically and personally. Good people who snap, who turn manipulative, passive-aggressive, vindictive, not because they're evil, but because they buried their anger instead of facing it. So what's the fix? You have to learn to negotiate. You have to learn to speak clearly about what you want and why you want it. That means defining your goals, then developing the courage to actually ask for what supports them. If that means asking for a raise, you make a case. If it means saying no to people who drain you, you hold the line. If it means stepping into conflict, you don't flinch. Because avoiding conflict isn't peacekeeping. It's short-term comfort that leads to long-term chaos. Peterson ties this to the truth. He says you have no better ally than the truth, even when it's painful. If you're being taken advantage of at work or in a relationship and you don't confront it, you're complicit. You're letting yourself down while hoping someone else figures it out for you. Standing up for yourself isn't aggression. It's my responsibility. It's realizing that you owe yourself as much as you owe everyone else. And yeah, it's going to feel uncomfortable. That's the point. Growth lives in discomfort. If you can't tolerate friction, you'll always collapse under pressure. Peterson puts it like this: courage isn't optional. If you don't have it, you don't get the life you want. It's the gatekeeper to reinvention, the bridge between who you are and who you could be. So you've built the vision, you've created the structure, now you defend it. And if that means stepping into hard conversations, setting boundaries, or risking rejection, so be it. Because your new inner code doesn't run on silence, it runs on truth. And truth always demands strength. So let's bring this all home. You don't reinvent your life in one massive leap. You do it in layers, built on shame, struggle, structure, and strength. The foundation? That moment you stop lying to yourself about where you really are. Peterson's 90-day process isn't magic. It's brutal honesty. It's clarity. It's small, repeatable actions that begin to reshape who you are at the root level. You start by lowering the ideal to something you can actually move toward. You take those tiny, humiliating steps, and you keep taking them. You confront your weakness not by hiding it, but by owning it. You evolve from naivety to cynicism, and then to courage. You hold on to faith when everything looks like it's falling apart. You define your future so clearly it pulls you forward. You schedule your life so your values show up on your calendar. And when the moment calls for it, you stand your ground and speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. That's how you reinvent your inner code, not through hype, not through shortcuts, through 90 days of disciplined vision and action. So if you're serious about change, don't just watch this and move on. Sit down, write it out, map the future you want, build a structure around it, and then fight for it every single day. Because no one's coming to rewrite you. That's on you now. And that's it. If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit the like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more of these kinds of videos. Thanks for watching.